Commander Lee Minho was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarms started blaring throughout Earth's Deep Space Communication Center. It was 0347 hours, and the night shift was usually quiet. Nothing exciting ever happened during the graveyard watch. "Sir, we're receiving an unknown transmission on the emergency frequencies," called out Communications Officer Park Soo-yoon from her station. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls, trying to clean up the signal. It's not from any human colony." Minho set down his coffee and walked over to the main display screen. After decades of searching the stars, humanity had found plenty of dead worlds and ancient ruins, but never a living alien civilization. The static cleared, and suddenly they were looking at something that definitely wasn't human. The creature standing before them was tall and elegant, with skin that looked like living crystal. Its features were beautiful in an otherworldly way, but there was something else in its large, dark eyes. Terror. Pure, desperate terror. "This message is directed to any spacefaring civilization capable of receiving this transmission," the alien said, its voice coming through their universal translator with a slight electronic warble. "I am Ambassador Vexel of the Vexian Alliance. If you are receiving this, please, we need your help." Minho felt his stomach drop, the way the alien spoke, the panic barely contained in its voice. This wasn't a friendly first contact message. Images began flowing across the screen, and Soo-yoon gasped behind him. Burning cities. Massive ships with dark, angular designs, raining fire from the sky. Crowds of crystalline beings like Vexal, huddled in refugee camps, their children clinging to them with fear. "For 300 cycles, we have lived in peace with our neighbors," Vexal continued. "The Vexian Alliance consists of 3 worlds, Vexia Prime, New Christia, and the mining colony of Zarian. We are scientists, artists, farmers. We have never known war." More images flashed by. Alien soldiers in black armor dragging Vexian children away from their families. Massive factories where crystalline beings worked under the whips of their captors. Ships loaded with precious metals and rare crystals leaving Vexian space. "But the Korath Empire found us 6 months ago," Vexal's voice cracked. "They came not as friends or traders, but as conquerors. They take our children to work in their slave camps. They strip our worlds of resources. Those who resist are killed. Those who submit live as prisoners on their own planets." Minho clenched his fists. He'd spent 20 years in the military before joining the Communication Corps, and he recognized genocide when he saw it. "We have sent messages across the galaxy, searching for anyone who might help us. Most species fear the Korath too much to respond. Others simply ignore our pleas." Vexal looked directly into the camera, and Minho could see tears forming in those alien eyes. "But perhaps somewhere out there is a species brave enough to stand against evil." The transmission began to break up, interference crackling across the signal. "We offer everything we have, our technology, our knowledge, our eternal gratitude in exchange for any assistance you can provide. Even a single ship, a few supplies, anything that might help us survive just a little longer." Static filled the screen for a moment before the Exala's face appeared one final time. "These are the coordinates to Vexia Prime. Please, we cannot hold much longer. If you are receiving this and you have any compassion in your hearts, remember us. Remember that we tried to be good people in a galaxy that has forgotten what goodness means." The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in deadly silence. General Kim Tae-young hadn't slept in 36 hours. The holographic star map in front of him painted a picture that made his blood run cold. Red markers dotted almost half the galaxy like a disease spreading through space. Each red dot represented a world under Korath control. Billions of lives enslaved or dead. "Show me the timeline again," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. Colonel Choi Ji-won pressed a button, and the map began moving backward through time. The Korath started their expansion 800 years ago from this region here. She pointed to a cluster of stars near the galactic core. They're not random raiders, General. This is systematic conquest on a scale we've never seen. The hologram showed the red markers spreading outward like spilled blood, consuming system after system. Green dots, free worlds, flickered and turned red one by one. What's their pattern? Asked Admiral Yoon Seojin from across the room. The old naval officer had fought in humanity's colonial wars, but even he looked shaken by the scope of the Korath Empire. They target peaceful civilizations first, Ji-won explained, highlighting several conquered systems. Species with advanced technology, but weak militaries. They study their targets for months, learning their weaknesses, their culture, their breaking points. She switched to intercepted communications. Listen to this. An alien voice filled the room, speaking in a language none of them recognized. The computer translated in real time. Sector Commander, the Altarian resistance has been crushed. All adult males executed as ordered. Females and children processed for labor assignment. The room went quiet. These weren't just military reports. They were execution orders. How many species have they wiped out completely? Tae-young asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. We've identified at least 43 extinct civilizations in Korath space, Gi-won replied. Planets that once had billions of inhabitants now serve as mining operations or military bases. Admiral Yoon pulled up a tactical analysis on his personal screen. What about their military strength? Could we actually fight these monsters if we had to? The Korath fleet numbers over 50,000 ships, Ji-won said. Everything from patrol craft to planet killers. Their technology is about equal to ours, but they have centuries of combat experience. They've conquered half the galaxy. They know how to win wars. Tae-young stared at the map, watching the red zone's pulse like a heartbeat. What do we know about how they treat conquered populations? Ji-won's expression darkened. They break them, General, systematically. First, they eliminate anyone who might lead a resistance. Government officials, military officers, intellectuals, religious leaders. Then they separate families, scatter populations across different worlds so they can't organize. And the children, taken young and raised as soldiers or workers. Within 2 generations, most conquered species forget they were ever free. She paused, her voice getting quieter. The Korath don't just want to rule, they want to erase entire cultures. Admiral Yoon leaned forward, studying the data streaming across his screen. The Vexians are offering us something significant, General. Their quantum computing technology could revolutionize our ship navigation systems. Their crystal-based energy storage is decades ahead of our batteries. Essentially, they're offering us their entire civilization's knowledge in exchange for help, Ji-won added. Scientific breakthroughs that took them thousands of years to develop. Tae-young walked closer to the holographic map, studying the 3 small blue dots that represented the Vexian worlds. So tiny compared to the massive red zone surrounding them, like 3 candles flickering in a hurricane. What's our intelligence assessment if we do nothing? He asked, though the question felt like swallowing glass. The Vexian alliance falls within 4 to 6 months, Gi-won replied without hesitation. Their defensive capabilities are minimal. They're scientists and artists, not warriors. Once the Korath finish with them, they'll have a clear path to this entire sector of the galaxy. And after that, unchecked expansion toward the galactic rim. Eventually, they'll find Earth. The weight of that statement settled over everyone in the room like a heavy blanket. The Korath Empire wasn't just the Vexians' problem. It was a cancer that would eventually consume everything in its path, including humanity. President Han Minji walked into the emergency council session knowing that the next hour would change human history forever. The circular chamber was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth. their faces grim as they studied the classified reports spread across their tablets. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage of Korath soldiers executing civilians, audio recordings of slave markets where alien children were bought and sold like cattle, satellite images of entire cities reduced to ash and rubble. The intelligence reports painted a picture so horrific that several council members had already left the chamber to vomit. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Han began, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. 3 days ago, we received our first communication from an alien civilization. The Vexian Alliance came to us not as conquerors or traitors, but as victims begging for their lives. She pressed a button, and the main screen displayed the footage everyone had already seen: Vexian families being torn apart, children dragged away screaming, crystal cities burning under alien bombardment. The Korath Empire has spent 8 centuries perfecting the art of genocide, she continued. They don't just conquer worlds, they erase entire species from existence. In 43 documented cases, they have wiped out civilizations completely. Not a single survivor left to remember what those people were like. Representative Kim Jong-soo from Korea raised his hand. "Madam President, while these atrocities are terrible, Earth has always followed a policy of non-interference in alien conflicts. Why should we break that policy now? Because, Representative Kim, this isn't just an alien conflict anymore." President Han switched to a tactical display showing Korath expansion patterns. "Our military analysts project that the Korath will reach human space within 50 to 70 years if their expansion continues unchecked." The chamber erupted in nervous whispers. This wasn't about helping strangers anymore, this was about human survival. Representative Singh from India stood up. "What exactly are we voting on, Madam President? Economic sanctions? Diplomatic pressure?" President Han looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "We're voting on whether to declare war on the Korath Empire." The silence that followed was deafening. War, not since the colonial conflicts of the early 2100s, had humanity fought a major military campaign, and never against an enemy that controlled half the galaxy. "The motion before us is simple," President Han announced. "Do we intervene militarily in the Vexian Korath conflict?" All those in favor? Hands began rising around the chamber. First a few, then dozens, then nearly everyone. Representative after representative stood up, their decisions made. The vote counter on the main screen climbed rapidly. 100, 200, 300, 347 votes in favor, the parliamentary secretary announced. 0 votes against. The motion passes unanimously. President Han nodded grimly. "Then we are at war." Within minutes, Admiral Yoon was establishing a secure communication link with the Vexian homeworld. The connection took several attempts. The Korath were jamming most frequencies, but eventually Ambassador That's All's crystalline face appeared on the screen. Admiral Yoon. Exal's voice was filled with desperate hope. "Please tell me you have good news, Ambassador?" "Texao. This is Admiral Yoon Seojin of the Earth Unified Fleet. Your request for assistance has been approved by our government." The alien's features literally glowed with relief. "Thank you, Admiral. Any aid you can provide would be a blessing. A few supply ships, perhaps some medical supplies for our wounded, maybe a patrol vessel or two to help with evacuations. Admiral." Yoon held up his hand to stop the alien's grateful rambling. His expression was stone-cold, serious as he looked directly into the camera. "Ambassador, I think you misunderstand the situation. We're not sending you aid packages or medical supplies." Vexel's glowing features dimmed with confusion. "I don't understand, Admiral. What are you sending?" "Everything we have," Yoon replied. "The entire Earth Unified Fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon in our arsenal. We're not coming to help with your war against the Korath Empire." He paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the statement that would echo across the galaxy. We're coming to end it. The hammering never stopped. Day and night, the sound of construction echoed through every human shipyard, from Mars to the outer colonies. Chief Engineer Lim Ji-hoon hadn't been home in 3 months. He practically lived on the construction platform now, watching the massive dreadnought Soul's Vengeance take shape before his eyes. Another 12-hour shift, Chief? Asked his assistant, bringing him his 5th cup of coffee that day. The Vexians don't have time for us to take breaks, Ji-hoon replied, studying the holographic blueprints floating in front of him. The Soul's Vengeance was going to be the largest warship humanity had ever built, 3 kilometers long and packed with enough firepower to level a small moon. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out at every major construction facility. The Luna yards were building a new class of fast attack cruisers. The orbital platforms around Jupiter were cranking out fighter squadrons 24 hours a day. Even the civilian shipyards had been converted to military production, transport. Coordinator Song Haijin was managing the logistics nightmare from Earth's military command center. Her job was to make sure every ship, every weapon, every spare part, and every soldier ended up in the right place at the right time. It was the most complex military operation in human history. We're moving 17 million tons of equipment and supplies, she reported to the Joint Chiefs during the daily briefing. That's more cargo than humanity has moved in the previous decade combined. The numbers were staggering. 200,000 Marines were training for boarding operations. 500,000 naval personnel were learning to operate the new ship systems. Factory worlds were working around the clock to produce ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. Ambassador Vexel watched all this preparation with growing amazement and confusion. The crystalline alien had been given a tour of the construction facilities, and what he saw didn't make sense to his peaceful mind. Admiral Yoon, he said during one of their regular briefings, I must ask, why are your people building so many ships? We told you the Korath have only 3 battle groups in our sector. Surely a few dozen vessels would be sufficient to drive them away. Admiral Yoon stood on the observation deck of the command station, watching as the newest destroyer completed its final systems check. Through the massive viewports, hundreds of ships moved in coordinated patterns, their crews running constant drills and weapon tests. Ambassador, I don't think you understand how humans think about war, Yoon said quietly. When we decide to fight, we don't fight to drive the enemy away. We fight to win completely. But 3 battle groups are just the beginning, interrupted Captain Beak, Jinwoo, as he joined them on the observation deck. His uniform bore the insignia of the new Deep Strike Division, humanity's most elite unit. The Korath Empire has existed for 800 years. Ambassador, they've conquered half the galaxy and enslaved billions of innocent people. Vexal's crystalline features reflected confusion. Yes, but we only asked for help with the forces attacking our worlds. And we're giving you that help, Yoon replied. But we're also going to make sure the Korath can never hurt anyone again. Not the Vexians, not any other peaceful species, and certainly not humanity. Through the viewports, they could see the massive fleet taking shape. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets. Carriers loaded with fighter squadrons. Fast destroyers designed for hit-and-run attacks. Massive transport ships carrying enough Marines to conquer a dozen worlds. This level of preparation seems excessive for a simple rescue mission, Vexel said weakly. Captain Beak smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ambassador, this isn't a rescue mission. This is an extermination. The Korath made their choice when they decided to make war on innocent people. Now they get to live with the consequences of that choice. Or die with them, Admiral Yoon added grimly. The largest military fleet in human history was almost ready. In a few more weeks, the Korath Empire would discover what happened when they picked a fight with the wrong species. The Korath sensor operator on Zarian Prime was half asleep when his console started screaming. Warning lights flashed red across his station as 12 massive spatial distortions appeared simultaneously throughout the system. He'd never seen readings like this before. "Commander," he shouted across the bridge. "We have multiple hyperspace exits. 12 ... No, wait. 17 separate fleets dropping out of hyperspace." Commander Vexstar, a massive reptilian creature, with scars covering his armored hide, stomped over to the sensor station. In his 8 centuries of service to the Korath Empire, he'd conquered 47 worlds. Nothing surprised him anymore. Probably just another merchant convoy running from our patrols, he growled. "How many ships total?" The sensor operator's claws trembled as he read the display. "Sir, ... I'm reading over 300 vessels. Unknown configuration, unknown energy signatures." That got Vexstar's attention. 300 ships was more than most civilizations possessed in their entire fleet. On screen, the main view screen flickered to life, showing space around Zarian Prime. What Vexstar saw made his blood run cold. Sleek, angular ships, unlike anything in their databases, filled the system. They moved with precision and purpose, their formations spreading out to surround the Korath garrison. Captain Osoyang smiled grimly as her destroyer wing completed their attack run. The Korath defensive grid was designed to stop traditional fleet attacks, ships approaching in neat formations, following predictable patterns. They weren't prepared for humanity's swarm tactics. "All ships, execute pattern Delta 7, she commanded over the squadron channel. Her destroyers broke formation and scattered like startled fish, only to regroup and strike the Korath stations from 12 different angles simultaneously. The Korath gunners couldn't keep up. Their massive defense platforms were designed to track and destroy large capital ships, not fast-moving destroyers that changed direction every few seconds. Within minutes, their entire outer defense grid was nothing but floating wreckage. On the flagship Inchin, Admiral Yoon watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The first phase had gone exactly as planned. Now came the part he'd been looking forward to for months. "Open a channel to the Korath command ship," he ordered. The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Yoon straightened his uniform and looked directly into the camera. His voice was calm and professional as it transmitted across all frequencies in the system. "Korath Command Vessel, this is Admiral Yoon Seojin of the Earth Unified Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. I'm giving you 10 minutes to evacuate your ships and surrender unconditionally." On the Korath command ship, Commander Vexstar stared at the alien face on his screen. These creatures looked weak, small, soft, nothing like the mighty Korath. How dare they demand his surrender? "You dare threaten the mighty Korath Empire?" he roared, his reptilian features twisted with contempt. "We have ruled this galaxy for 8 centuries. We have crushed 1,000 civilizations beneath our boots. What makes you think your pathetic little fleet can challenge us?" Admiral Yoon checked his chronometer without changing expression. 9 minutes, 30 seconds, he replied calmly. "We'll show you the power of the Korath Empire," Vexstar screamed. "All ships, attack formation. Destroy these insects." The Korath battle group moved to attack, their massive dreadnoughts bringing their main guns to bear on the human fleet. They outnumbered the immediate human forces, 2 to 1, and their ships were larger and more heavily armored. It didn't matter, the human ships moved like nothing the Korath had ever encountered. Instead of trading broadside shots, like civilized warships, they swarmed the Korath vessels like angry wasps. Fighters launched from hidden bays, their pilots executing maneuvers that should have killed them from the acceleration forces alone. The Korath return fire was devastating, but ineffective. They kept aiming where the human ships had been, not where they were going to be. Meanwhile, human weapons found their targets with terrifying precision. "Sir," the Korath sensor operator called out, his voice shaking with terror. We've lost the Dominator and the Conquering Fist. The Eternal Victory is venting atmosphere from 17 hull breaches. Commander Vexstar watched his fleet die around him. In less than 8 minutes, the mighty Korath battle group had been reduced to drifting wreckage. The human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. The last thing he saw was a human missile streaking toward his bridge. News of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with communication technology picked up the scattered transmissions from fleeing Korath ships. The message was simple and terrifying. The unknown aliens from the Galactic Rim had just destroyed an entire Korath battle group without taking a single casualty. The Korath Empire had ruled through fear for 8 centuries. Now, for the first time in their history, they were the ones who were afraid. Emperor Vrakith slammed his massive fist on the obsidian throne, causing the entire throne room to shake. The reptilian ruler of the Korath Empire had built his power on fear, and now some unknown species from the Galactic Rim had destroyed one of his battle groups without losing a single ship. These humans think they can challenge 8 centuries of Korath dominance. He roared at his assembled generals. Show them what happens when lesser species dare to defy us. The order went out within hours. 3 Korath dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace above New Busan Colony, a peaceful human settlement on the edge of explored space. The colonists had barely enough time to register the massive alien ships before the bombardment began. Governor Park Min-jae was in his office, reviewing crop reports when the first plasma bolts lit up the sky. He rushed to the window just in time to see the capital city's shields flicker and fail under the sustained assault. All civilians to the emergency bunkers. He shouted into his communicator, but it was already too late. The Korath weren't targeting military installations or government buildings. They were targeting everything: schools, hospitals, residential districts. The orbital bombardment was systematic and merciless. 30 million people, men, women, children, elderly, were vaporized in a matter of minutes. The beautiful terraformed world that had taken decades to build was reduced to a burning wasteland. The last transmission from New Busan was from emergency. Sheltered deep underground, this is New Busan Colony, under attack by alien forces. Casualties in the millions. Please, remember us. Then, silence. The news reached Earth 16 hours later. President Han Min-jae was in a budget meeting when her aide burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. Madam President, she gasped. New BUSAN ... It's gone. All of it. 30 million people. The emergency cabinet meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. There was no debate, no discussion of diplomatic options, no calls for restraint. The Korath had crossed a line that could never be UNCROSED. Admiral Jung Woo-yuk received his orders with grim satisfaction. He'd been hoping someone would authorize the use of humanity's most classified weapons. The Korath had just given him the perfect excuse. Operation Dark Mirrors authorized. Came the transmission from Earth Command. No survivors. Jung's fleet was different from the ships that had fought at Zarian Prime. These vessels carried technology that humanity had spent decades perfecting in secret weapons that bent the very fabric of space and time. The scientists called them reality disruptors. The military had a simpler name: planet killers. The 3 Korath systems responsible for New Busan's destruction were Krextar, Volmoth, and Zekrion. Each contained billions of Korath citizens, living on dozens of worlds. Jung's fleet approached each system simultaneously, using experimental faster-than-light drives that left no hyperspace signature. What happened next defied explanation. The stars simply went out, not exploded, not collapsed into black holes. They just stopped existing. One moment the Krextar system was there on every sensor and telescope in the galaxy. The next moment, there was empty space where 3 planets and a star used to be. The same thing happened to Volmoth, and Zekrion. 3 entire solar systems, each containing billions of Korath citizens, were erased from existence, as if they had never been there in the first place. Across the galaxy, alien intelligence services went into panic mode. Emergency sessions convened on 100 worlds as species tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans have weaponized dark matter, reported the Altarian Science Council in their classified briefing to their government. They can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. This goes beyond conventional warfare, concluded the Zephyrian Strategic Analysis Division. The humans have demonstrated the ability to delete matter from existence. Their technology defies known physics. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any of the wild theories being proposed. Humanity hadn't developed some impossible superweapon. They had simply decided that anyone who committed genocide against human civilians would face consequences beyond all rational limits. Within days of the 3 systems disappearing, 17 different species sent urgent diplomatic messages to Earth. They all said essentially the same thing. We formally request to place our worlds under human protection. The balance of galactic power had shifted overnight. For 8 centuries, species had bowed to the Korath Empire because resistance meant extinction. Now, there was something in the galaxy that the Korath feared more than their enemies feared them. Emperor Vrakt stared at the empty space where 3 of his core systems used to exist, and for the first time in his long life, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Terror. The dawn sky over Vexia Prime was blood red when General Shin Taiyan's assault transports broke through the atmosphere. From her command ship, she could see the capital city of Crystal Falls burning below. The Korath had been systematically destroying the beautiful crystalline structures for months. But what made her stomach turn was seeing Vexian civilians being herded into the streets as living shields. General, we're detecting massive Korath troop concentrations around the government district, reported her tactical officer. They've got at least 50,000 Vexian prisoners positioned between our landing zones and the Parliament building. Taiyan gritted her teeth. The Korath were using the oldest coward's trick in warfare, hiding behind innocent people. But she'd come too far to back down now. All units, this is General Shin. Rules of engagement are as follows. No civilian casualties whatsoever. I don't care if it takes us a week to clear each building. We do this right. The first wave of human Marines hit the beaches of Vexia Prime just as the sun reached its peak. Commander Kong Dong-yoon coordinated the orbital support from his battlecruiser, using precision strikes to target Korath positions while carefully avoiding areas where prisoners were being held. Lieutenant Ru Cha-young led her squad through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful crystal garden. The Vexian structures grew like living things, their walls shifting and flowing like frozen water. Now most of them were shattered and broken. Movement ahead, whispered Corporal Lee. From point position. Looks like a group of civilians. Chae-young raised her binoculars and saw them, maybe 30 Vexian adults and children huddled in the remains of a fountain, their crystalline skin dim with fear and exhaustion. Standing behind them were 6 Korath soldiers in black armor, weapons, trained on the prisoners. Standard hostage situation, she murmured into her comm unit. Taking position for clean shots. The rescue took 17 minutes of careful positioning and split-second timing. When it was over, the Vexian civilians were safe, and the Korath guards were dead. But it was just one small group among thousands scattered throughout the city. The fighting was unlike anything the human military had ever experienced. Every street corner was a potential hostage situation. Every building had to be cleared room by room to avoid hitting prisoners. The Korath fought with the desperation of cornered animals, knowing they were facing an enemy that had already erased 3 of their star systems. Casualty report, General Shin requested during a brief pause in the assault. We've lost 60% of the 3rd Regiment, came the grim reply. The 5th is down to company strength. Medical units are overwhelmed. The numbers were staggering. Human soldiers were dying by the thousands to avoid harming Vexian civilians. In any normal military operation, commanders would have called for orbital bombardment and ended the battle in hours. But this wasn't about winning quickly. It was about proving that humanity would pay any price to do the right thing. "General," Lieutenant Chae-young's voice crackled over the radio. "We've secured the Parliament building. The Vexian government officials are alive." 26 hours after the battle began, the ancient crystal spires of Vexia Prime's Parliament building flew to flags. The traditional blue and silver banner of the Vexian Alliance, and below it, the flag of Earth. The symbolism was clear to every species watching the live broadcasts across the galaxy. Humanity had not come as conquerors, but as liberators. "Admiral," Yoon's message was transmitted simultaneously to every communication network in known space, to all civilized species of the galaxy. "This is Admiral Yoon Seojin of the Earth Unified Fleet. Today, the Vexian homeworld has been liberated from Koreth occupation. The Koreth Empire can choose to surrender now and face justice for their crimes, or we will continue our advance. We will dismantle them piece by piece, world by world, until nothing remains but memory." The response from Emperor Vrayek came within 6 hours. His reptilian features filled screens across the galaxy as he delivered his defiant reply. "The Koreth Empire has ruled for 8 centuries. We do not surrender to inferior species who crawled out of some backwater system. Come and try to take our worlds, humans. We will show you what real warriors can do." Admiral Yoon's reply was broadcast just as widely, but his tone was calm and matter-of-fact. "Emperor Vrayeth, you have chosen extinction for your people. We will accommodate that choice." The die was cast. There would be no negotiation, no diplomatic solution, no peaceful end to this war. The Koreth Empire would fight to the death, and humanity was prepared to give them exactly what they wanted. The war room on Earth was dead silent as Fleet Admiral Park Yejin presented her plan for the final assault on Koreth Prime. The holographic display showed the enemy homeworld surrounded by the most powerful defensive network ever constructed. Energy shields that could withstand the combined firepower of 1,000 fleets. Orbital weapons platforms the size of cities, and a garrison of 10 million Korath warriors. "The planet is impregnable," admitted General Im Changman, studying the tactical readouts. "Those shields have never been broken in 8 centuries. Even our reality disruptor weapons can't penetrate that kind of defensive matrix." Admiral Yejin smiled grimly and highlighted a small object orbiting Koreth Prime. "Then we don't break the shields, General. We overload them." She zoomed in on Koreth Prime's largest moon, a barren chunk of rock about the size of Earth's Luna. The shield generators draw power from the planet's core. They're designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts, but they have an upper limit. "You want to ram their moon into the planet?" asked Colonel Kim Young-sik, his voice filled with disbelief. "Not ram, precisely guide," Yejin corrected. "We use gravity manipulators to alter the moon's orbit just enough to create a controlled collision with their shield matrix. The kinetic energy will overload their generators and bring down the entire defensive grid." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Moving a moon was beyond anything any species had ever attempted. The energy requirements alone would drain half of Earth's power grid. "Admiral, with respect, that's impossible," said General Im. "Even if we could move a celestial body, the Korath will see it coming from millions of kilometers away. They'll have hours to evacuate or reinforce their shields, which is why we're going to do it in 17 minutes. Yejin replied calmly. She pulled up the technical specifications for humanity's newest experimental drive system. The quantum displacement engines can move massive objects through folded space. We install the drives on the moon, activate them, and the moon appears directly above their shield generators before they can react. The silence that followed was deafening. What she was proposing wasn't just military strategy. It was rewriting the laws of physics as applied to warfare. The risks are enormous, warned Dr. Song Yoonji, the chief scientist assigned to the project. If the calculations are even slightly off, we could destabilize the entire star system. We're talking about moving a moon through dimensions we barely understand. Admiral Ye-jin looked around the room at the assembled commanders, scientists, and politicians. The Korath Empire has spent 8 centuries enslaving and murdering innocent people. They destroyed New Busan. They're using prisoners as human shields on every world we liberate. Are we really going to let technical difficulties stop us from ending this nightmare? The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, the largest human fleet ever assembled took position around Korath Prime. Emperor Vrayeth watched from his throne room as the alien ships surrounded his homeworld, confident that his impregnable defenses would crush these upstart humans. "Let them come," he growled to his generals. "Our shields have never been broken. Our weapons will turn their ships to vapor before they can fire a single shot." High above the planet, human engineers made final adjustments to the quantum displacement drives they had secretly installed on the moon. The operation had taken weeks of careful planning and stealth technology to avoid detection. "All systems green," reported Chief Engineer Park Ji-hoon. "Displacement drives are charging to full power." Admiral Ye-jin took a deep breath. In the next few minutes, they would either achieve the impossible or destroy themselves trying. Execute. Operation Moonfall. The quantum drives activated with a flash of energy that lit up space like a miniature star. Korath Prime's moon simply vanished from its orbit, disappearing into folded spacetime. 17 minutes later, it reappeared directly above the planetary shield generators. The collision was visible from neighboring star systems. The moon struck the energy barriers with the force of 10,000 nuclear weapons, its mass creating a kinetic impact that overloaded every shield generator on the planet simultaneously. "Shields are down," shouted the human tactical officer. "All defensive grids are offline. All ships, commence bombardment," Admiral Ye-jin ordered. "Target military installations only. Avoid civilian areas." The human fleet opened fire with surgical precision. Military bases, weapons, factories, government buildings all were reduced to rubble within hours. But hospitals, schools, and residential districts were left untouched. Emperor Vrayeth's final transmission was broadcast across the galaxy as his palace crumbled around him. "How?" he demanded, his reptilian features twisted with rage and disbelief. "How does an unknown species from the galactic rim defeat an empire that has ruled for 8 centuries? President Han's reply came directly from Earth, her voice calm and measured. "Because, Emperor, humans don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight for justice. And when we fight for justice, we don't calculate odds or measure costs. We simply don't stop until we win." The Korath Empire surrendered unconditionally 6 hours later. The new council chambers on Unity Station were a marvel of cooperative engineering. Built in the neutral space between human and Vexian territory, the massive structure represented something the galaxy had never seen before, a truly free alliance of equal species working together by choice, not conquest. Ambassador Thexal walked through the gleaming corridors, still amazed by what had happened in just 1 year. The crystalline Vexian's skin glowed softly with contentment as he passed representatives from dozens of worlds. Furry Altarians chatted with insectoid Zephyrians. Aquatic Oceani floated in specialized suits alongside humanoid tyrants. It was everything the old Korath Empire had never been: diverse, peaceful, and built on mutual respect rather than fear. The dedication ceremony was being broadcast to every world in the Free Worlds Alliance. 47 species had joined the coalition in the months following the Korath Empire's collapse, and more requested membership every week. They all came seeking the same thing: protection from the chaos that followed when an 8 empire suddenly vanished overnight. President Han Mingi spoke first, her words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. Today marks not the end of one empire and the beginning of another, but the birth of something new. A galaxy where strength protects the weak, where advanced civilizations help developing ones, and where no species stands alone against oppression. The applause was thunderous, but Dexal noticed something interesting. The human representatives weren't applauding the loudest. They sat quietly, almost humbly, as if uncomfortable with all the praise being heaped on their species. After the formal speeches, Dexal approached Admiral Yoon during the reception. The human military commander looked older than he had a year ago. New scars crisscrossed his face from the brutal ground fighting on Vexia Prime, and his hair had gone completely gray. The war had aged him decades and months. "Admiral Dex," said his translated voice, carrying a tone of deep curiosity. "I must ask you something that has puzzled my people for months." Yoon looked up from his glass of water. He'd refused the alien delicacies being served. "What's on your mind, Ambassador? Your species fought harder for our freedom than we fought for ourselves," Dexal said, gesturing toward the assembled representatives. "You lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, liberating worlds you'd never heard of, protecting people you'd never met. You spent your entire military budget and converted your peaceful economy into a war machine. Why?" The question caught the attention of nearby delegates. Soon a small crowd had gathered, all waiting to hear the human's answer. It was the question many species had been asking since the war ended. Why had humanity sacrificed so much for strangers? Admiral Yoon was quiet for a long moment, looking out through the massive viewports at the stars beyond. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Ambassador, a year ago your people sent a desperate message across the galaxy. You weren't asking for conquest or glory or profit. You were asking for help because innocent people were dying, and you couldn't stop it alone." He turned to face the gathered delegates, his scarred features serious but kind. "When good people ask for help against evil, humans don't form committees to study the problem. We don't send aid packages or peacekeeping observers or diplomatic protests." The chamber had grown quiet, with even the background conversations fading, as more delegates stopped to listen. "We send everything," Yoon continued, his words now being broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. "Every ship, every soldier, every resource we can spare. We mortgage our future, sacrifice our comfort, and risk our lives. Because that's what you do when innocent people are in danger." "But why?" asked a delegate from the Centauri Republic. "Our species barely knew each other existed." Admiral Yoon smiled sadly. "Because that's what it means to be human. We don't help people because we expect something in return. We don't calculate the costs or measure the benefits. We help because it's right, and because we can't sleep at night, knowing we could have saved lives and chose not to." The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, the applause began. Not the polite, diplomatic clapping of formal ceremonies, but something deeper. A sound of genuine gratitude and respect that echoed through the chamber and across the communication networks to every world in the Alliance. Ambassador XOS. Crystalline features glowed brighter as he joined the applause. For the first time in galactic history, a species had used their military might not for conquest or profit, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy would never be the same.